we get to the meat of the episode, which is the live action debut of Thrawn. And I have to say, I thought it was handled very well. My reverence and love for Grand Admiral Thrawn, who was the creation of author Timothy Zahn in the 90s. It kind of makes it difficult for my expectations to be met, right? They're very high in regards to that character because I love them so much. But I thought his introduction was handled extremely well. Like they make it very ominous and epic. Hello, and thank you for checking out the video. I just want to let you know that I not only create content on my YouTube channel, Class in the Glass, but I'm also on Twitch, where I review movies, cartoons, and TV shows live, while also playing single-player games and multiplayer games. I also have a Patreon where subscribers have access to hundreds of video and audio commentaries for films and cartoons, as well as podcasts and videocasts. In the meantime, thank you again for watching. Enjoy the video. We're going to go ahead and we're going to move on to the next part of my show, and I will be doing my review for Ahsoka Episode 6, Far, Far Away. Great title, I have to say. And for those that have not been following Ahsoka or who are unaware of the events that have since transpired, I want to give you a brief synopsis for this episode. Ahsoka and Huyang think of the past while pondering Sabine Wren's risky choice of assisting the Imperial loyalists, while Elsbeth and the Force-wielding mercenaries arrive in the faraway galaxy and finally meet the long-lost Grand Admiral Thrawn. Before jumping into the review itself for this episode, which I have to say I've really enjoyed, but I have to state this, as I've stated a few times during these reviews. I've been somewhat mixed on Ahsoka thus far. While I certainly appreciate the story that Dave Filoni has been telling, and it's been nice to see, Rebels continue on in live action, some of the choices for the show have bothered me a little bit. Especially, the way in which the actors for the show the way in which the actors are being told to be so stoic, kind of slow their speech pattern. It's been a little distracting and weird. It kind of makes them feel off from their animated counterparts, who have a lot of personality, chat. And, are not monotone in the way in which they speak. It's certainly a directing choice, certainly a creative choice, but it's one that I don't think has served many of the characters well so far in this series. And I think it's kind of flattened their personalities somewhat. Other people haven't been bothered by it. Some people have been bothered by it. I've been kind of mixed on it. Sometimes it doesn't bother me. Sometimes there's actually some great character moments, which I will be getting into in just a bit. Like, really love how they're handling the characters of Baylan Skoll and Shin Hati, who are new characters introduced in this series. I don't know, some of the returning faces, especially like from Rebels, and Clone Wars, like Ahsoka, played by Rosario Dawson, and Harrison Dula, played by Meredith Winstead. There's just something that feels a little off by their performances. I wouldn't say like they're bad or anything, but there's just something about their cadence, the way in which they're speaking in their long pauses. Again, it's a creative choice that Filoni has embraced, and I don't know if it always works throughout the show. Although, again, some people aren't bothered by it. However, despite those things, I have to say, I think Episode 6, Far, Far Away, is easily the best episode of the series so far. And it certainly achieves that by making Star Wars history, by finally introducing us to a live-action Grand Admiral Thrawn, played by Lars Mikkelsen, who returns, who previously voiced the character in Star Wars Rebels. But before getting into Thrawn, I do want to say that the episode's opening between Ahsoka and Huyang, voiced by David Tennant, was quite good. I like them pondering on Sabine's choice to help the Imperial loyalists in order to save Ezra, but also worried over the fact that Thrawn could return as the heir to the Empire and reunite the various Imperial warlords and wage a new war against the weak and very corrupt New Republic. We also get to see them reflect on the Jedi Order and their time with it. It was nice. It was a nice, thoughtful conversation in which, the more stoic tone did not bother me as much. It just really shows you that there's like a lot of history between those two characters. And Hu Yang up to this point, I think outside of like Baylan Skoll and Shin Hati, I think he was one of the better supporting characters in this series so far. He was providing a lot of personality, and I do like, I quite like his relationship with Ahsoka. Him and Rosario Dawson work well off of each other. Moving on from the opening, we get to the meat of the episode, which is the live action debut of Thrawn. And I have to say, I thought it was handled very well. My reverence and love for Grand Admiral Thrawn, who was the creation of author Timothy Zahn in the 90s. It kind of makes it difficult for my expectations to be met, right? They're very high in regards to that character because I love them so much. But I thought his introduction was handled extremely well. Like, they make it very ominous and epic, where we finally get to this planet, which is a graveyard, this kind of like wasteland where all these space whales just go to die. Like, we notice that this massive ring around this world is actually made up of a variety of dead extraterrestrial carcasses, chat. All these different like ancient spacefaring cultures have gone to this planet and just seemingly died. I mean, it's literally the elephant graveyard from The Lion King, chat. It's like, oh, that was pretty cool. But when we finally, touch down on the planet, and, we have all our characters. You have, Elsbeth, and we have our Jedi mercenaries and Sabine Wren and everything. We're introduced to, like, these witches, the Dathomir witches, and they've kind of set up. This, I guess, was where they originally originated from, thousands upon thousands of years ago. And we see their temples and their ancient statues just littering the wastelands. Like, it's really cool because the world kind of looks primordial. I was like, oh, I kind of like this look. It gave me, it gave me kind of like an Alien Prometheus vibe, except good, right? In terms of like how this world looked. I was like, oh, there's some like really clever ideas in world building. There's a lot of great world building in this episode. But then, this all sets up for the arrival of Grand Admiral Thrawn. Again, what a great way to introduce the character, where we see his massive Star Destroyer come in, the Chimera, right? Which was, the Chimera was a Star Destroyer in the Thrawn trilogy, and they brought into Rebels. But here, it's clearly seen it's seen countless battles and it's battle damage, and you can see that they don't have like the right materials to repair it, and so it's all like mixed and matched, and it's using like this gold plating and the silver plating. It's just this war-torn Star Destroyer, and we just see it rising up over the horizon and coming towards them before lowering itself down on this massive temple. And again, this is kind of how I wanted the sequel trilogy Stormtroopers to all look, because we finally see, before we even see Grand Admiral Thrawn himself, we see just like these guys have been lost in space for like over a decade, for like what, 10 years or so, about 10 years, I'd say. And they come in and we see them all in this battle damaged armor. It's all being like, again, it's like different materials. We see like this gold material, the silver material. It has like this wrapping all over, them, like this red, just keeping the armor together. It's just a really interesting look to them. It's kind of like, what if we mix Star Wars with post-apocalyptic Mad Max? And that's the look of it. I'm just like, this is awesome. This is awesome. And then, before we even see him, Chad, his troops, again, the music here, because they're using his theme from Rebels, and it's that really kind of cool organ music, which we don't really hear like organ music in Star Wars. But like his troops are just like saying his name, shouting his name, like he's almost like a god to them at this point. They're so passionately loyal to Thrawn. They're saying Thrawn, Thrawn, and it feels like it's made up of like different languages and like different types of voices. It's like, I wonder if like all these stormtroopers are like human. I think maybe some of them might even be aliens. It's just the way they came across to me. And then we just see him just march down, his troops on either side, and we're finally introduced to Lars Mikkelsen, Admiral Thrawn, this is an older Thrawn, the Thrawn that we saw in Rebels, and has often been portrayed in other media, especially like with the books. Obviously, we don't know his exact age, but he's probably middle aged. Like here, he's an older man. Here, he is Lars Mikkelsen's age, which I would guess is in his 60s, perhaps even in his 70s, chap, but. Lars Mikkelsen does such a great job in this episode. He brings the same level of cold, calculating menace that he brought to the character in Star Wars Rebels. Thrawn is popular in Legends because he was so different than most Star Wars villains. And he offers something new. When we think of typical Star Wars villains, I think we often think of Darth Vader. We think of Emperor Palpatine, right? These guys who are seemingly pure evil, using their dark magic, using the Force. Like, that's what they do. Like, Thrawn, he is not a Force user. He's not your prototypical Star Wars villain, which we've seen across, at this point, like the 9+ films, He is a guy who is all about understanding one's enemy. And he's always famously said, to defeat your enemy, you must know them. You need to study their history, their culture, their art. He's obsessed with art. And by studying all these things, you can predict what your enemy will do, and then you can soundly defeat him. He's not like straight evil. He does bad things, but he's doing these things because he thinks it's the right thing to do. Like in the original books, which is so cool, which is kind of, they in a way, they're kind of doing what the books did, except, the events at which they transpired are different. In the Legends novels, Thrawn comes back to the known galaxy about 6 years after the events of Return of the Jedi. And we learned the reason why he was gone is because he was sent on the special mission to Palpatine to basically scope and study the unknown regions, the places that are outside of the known Star Wars galaxy. And he spent all that time conquering various worlds who knew nothing about the Jedi or the Empire. He just went out there, conquered all these places, all these planets, and amassed the massive amount of resources and created a huge armada and people who are incredibly loyal to him. And he then returned after his mission was seemingly successful. He amassed this huge fleet, and he came back. He's like, Emperor Palpatine and Darth Vader are dead? Okay. Well, I'm the Emperor now. Like, he has a great quote in the original novels where he's just like, I rule the Empire now, not some long dead Emperor and Vader. And I was like, oh, it's so cool. And he's so different than them. And also, he kind of stands out because he was one of the few aliens in a position of power within the Empire, since the Empire was very racist, speciesist, I suppose, and didn't allow. But because, Thrawn was so intelligent and was such a master tactician, Palpatine's like, I don't like this blue bastard, but he's so smart, so we got to have him here, And he takes this opportunity to almost defeat the New Republic, and he comes very close to it, actually. And I absolutely loved it. He brings all of that within even the few minutes of screen time that he gets. That is all coming across to me, and I thought it was great. I thought it's like, this is what this show needs. This is what Star Wars need. You need a villain that people can get invested in and fear, but you also need someone that's very different than typical Star Wars foes that we've seen before. I think, like, if he's similar to anyone, I would say he's Tarkin-esque, But we only spent like one movie with Grand Moff Tarkin, and how they operate and what they do is a little different from each other, but they do have some similarities. But it's like, hey, what if we got like more time to spend with Tarkin? That's kind of how I would pitch Admiral Thrawn to people who are completely unaware of him. Like, what if Tarkin was like had even more immense power, was calling the shots? Except Thrawn is probably more intelligent than Tarkin is, and is a master strategist, and almost pushed the New Republic to the brink of destruction. Like, that's what he is. Outside of Thrawn, outside Thrawn, along with Thrawn, we're also introduced to, Ezra Bridger, played by Esmin Afandi. I think that's how you say his name. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing it. And although we only get like a little time spent with him in this episode, it was nice to see someone outside of Thrawn bringing a lot of personality. And in Ezra's case, humor to the role. Like, Ezra Bridger, of course, is one of the main leads, if not was the main lead of Star Wars Rebels. And, this young kid was adopted by this rebel cell and eventually became a Jedi and fought against numerous foes and, met his final foe, which was Thrawn, and them getting lost, beyond the galaxy into another galaxy for 10 years. I was interested how they're going to handle that. And I think he does a really good job. I'm not familiar with this actor, but he looks like him. He looks exactly like the character from the show, just a little bit older and everything. And we find out like what he's been doing, why he's been hiding, of course. And he brings the personality. I think that's a lot of our main cast has been missing, because again, so many of the characters from Rebels just don't seem to have the same type of personality that they do in the original animated show. Here he feels like, okay, this feels like a natural at least so far in the first few minutes that we've seen him. This feels like a natural translation because he's funny, he's being sarcastic, he's being fun. And even see some of that rubbing off on Sabine Wren in this episode. And I like that. They do something with Sabine Wren that kind of bothers me, though, where she's like, I'm not going to tell you how I got here. He's like, how did you get here? How did you find me? And she's like, I want to tell you that. He's like, I kind of want you to. He's like, well, I'll talk about it later. And he's like, okay. I'm like, wait a goddamn minute. You gotta tell him. You absolutely gotta tell him. And I'm sure she'll tell him in the next episode, but still, that was a little weird. But I really liked him. I think a lot of people are focusing on Admiral Thrawn for good reason, because he's this beloved Star Wars character that finally made his live action debut after being introduced over 30 years ago, in the early 90s. This is like, wow. But yeah, we definitely want to give a shout out to Esmond Afandi. I think he does a great job in the little screen time that he has gotten in that episode. I like it. Also, other than Hu Yang, my two other characters that we were following, before Thrawn was introduced, Baylan Skoll and Shin Hati, they have been great in this series from the very beginning. And we're also kind of learning more about what Baylan's endgame is, what he wants to do. I mean, we get he gets really introspective with his apprentice in this episode, talking about the Jedi Order and what it meant to him at the time, and how it needed to change and it was inherently flawed. That was really refreshing to hear. Where he misses the idea of the Jedi, but he knows that they made so many mistakes, and he doesn't want to repeat those mistakes. And so he's seemingly on a quest to restore the Order, but create a whole different one. Not Jedi, not Sith. He even says, because at one point, they're talking about Ezra Bridger and what he meant to the galaxy and what he meant to all these people. And Shin kind of compares herself to him because, it's mentioned that Ezra wasn't trained within the Order. He was trained, in the wild, basically, by a Padawan. And she's like, it was kind of like me. And he's like, no, not like you. You're better. And so it also kind of shows the relationship. I also like that their relationship is not one that is antagonistic. Because I think when you think of a lot of, certainly Sith relationships, they're just inherently antagonistic. It's the master and your apprentice. The master has the power and the apprentice that always covets it, right? And it's never very positive. And this one, there seems to be, I don't know, even more warmth between them than even some Jedi Padawan relationships in the prequels. Their relationship is certainly healthier. It's despite them doing bad guy stuff, it's certainly healthier than the relationship between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker. And so I'm really liking them quite a bit. I was just like, man, and he has an idea, he wanted to come to this world for a reason. And I don't want to get too much into that because it's this is kind of interesting what you want to do. And maybe have this be the ground zero for maybe a new order. It's that's kind of interesting. And you can create it in isolation and gain power that way. And so I'm very curious what they're going to be doing with them. I'm wondering how that storyline is going to wrap up, if it even will. Sadly, Chad, with the tragic passing of Ray Stevenson, surprisingly passed away not too long ago, and he's been doing he did such a great job with this character and in this show. I wonder how they're going to handle everything that's going to happen with him and Shin. But they've been very good. I think they've been very good throughout the series. They've been some of the standouts to me. Overall, this was by far the best episode of the series, and it's certainly bolstered by the introduction of Grand Admiral Thrawn and Ezra Bridger. Live action Star Wars needs characters like this. Star Wars, listen, I'm always going to love Star Wars. I grew up in the original trilogy. I always loved those movies. You could see it in back check. I got my posters back there and everything. I have my Empire Strikes Back poster right here. Always loved the property, but there's been a lot of ups and a lot of downs, a lot of peaks, a lot of valleys with the Star Wars, property. The Disney era has very much followed that as well. Let's say there hasn't been good stuff. Rogue One I thought was excellent, and Andor I thought was very good. Like the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian. I still like The Force Awakens. What came afterwards, I did not. But, there has been some good stuff. But there's been a lot of mishandling of the property. And you just need you need a central thorough line. You need a thorough line to follow. And it feels like in so much of the stuff, we don't know what we're working towards. The quality levels, the aesthetics, everything is so different. And to provide yourself some structure, which they should have done this. They should have done this, chat. Personally, I would have loved an adaptation of the Thrawn trilogy in live action and have that be the actual sequel trilogy. But I'm guessing at this point, they will use that material to fill in the many plot holes introduced in the sequel trilogy and lead up to those films' events. I think that's what they're most likely going to do. Like, I would love it if they said, fuck it, we're just going to ignore all that and just do something completely new. They won't. They're going to film. They're already doing that in some episodes of The Mandalorian. Remember that in season 2, and they had the cloning facilities and Palpatine and Mando season 3. They mentioned that Necromancer project. I was like, well, that's how Palpatine returned. So I imagine all that's going to go in that direction. Which Thrawn. I hope. My one ask is because that's what they're going to do, and I think that's disappointing personally, but I don't want Thrawn to be a part of that project that brought Palpatine back, because he doesn't seem to be that kind of guy. He's like, no. I'm not bringing Palpatine back. I'm not bringing Vader back. It's like, I rule the Emperor. I rule the Empire now. I'm Emperor. Like, I want someone, because they've been calling him Grand Admiral Thrawn, Grand Admiral. There will be a line drop where they will refer to him as Emperor Thrawn, and I'll be here. I'll be like, yes, he is Emperor Thrawn now, and I would absolutely love that. But he's very different. Again, he's very different than Palpatine. He's very different from Vader. He's not like them. He's not like all the way evil. He does bad things. Most certainly, he does bad things in this episode. It's like, Jesus, man, that's cold. That's how he's always thinking. He's always calculating. And I like that, and I would love to see. We need like a really competent Star Wars villain, and then you can provide structure all around that. Like, Thrawn he's not that guy that's, what we're gonna do? We're gonna build the Death Star 3. He's not that guy. He's like, no, we're gonna look at the resources that we have, and we're going to implement them in a very creative way that is unexpected for our enemies. And he does that in the books. Like, there's this one instance, and I know I'm going on a tangent right now, but again, I just want to, promote this character and show why he's so cool. Like, instead of, creating a super weapon, what he does is he goes to, an asteroid belt, and he begins using his ships to basically capture asteroids these meteors and things, asteroids that are floating around in space using tractor beams, and he holds them in his cargo hold. And then what he does is he does guerrilla tactics. He'll send his fleet then to Coruscant, where that's very dangerous because that's the capital of the New Republic. But then he'll just suddenly shoot out these asteroids to the planet. And they're so massive, and there's so many of them, that they can't all hit them. And what happens is he begins targeting the places of infrastructure and the economy and everything, all the sociopolitical apparatus of the Republic. He'll hit them there, and then he'll just fucking bug out. He'll just say, all right, bye, and he'll just leave. And he does that, just peppering all these worlds and laying waste to their infrastructure, making them weak over time. That's what he would do. And I love that. That's what I want to see him do. I think they even say it's like the Thrawn maneuver. That's like that. That's what he would do. He would capture asteroids and then use them against his enemies. And he wouldn't expend any resources, wouldn't expend any men, wouldn't expend any energy. Just send those suckers out and watch them all destroy everybody. It's that's what we need with him. And I'm hoping that's what they'll provide. At the end of the day, I would have loved a loose adaptation of the Thrawn trilogy. I think they still can do that. There is a way to do that, but I don't think they're going to do that. They'll just use him to plug in all the plot holes from the sequel films, which is somewhat frustrating. But at the end of the day, like I said, I think this was a very good episode. I think it succeeded in spades when it came to introducing this character. I think Lars Mikkelsen does an amazing job playing him. I mean, it's a natural translation over from Rebels to, animated to live action, from the books to animation to live action. He's older. He's certainly older. He is not the young man that he once was, but that's fine. It makes sense. Living out in the wilds of space for so long, it's going to age you. And so I think that's fine with me. I don't mind an older Grand Admiral Thrawn. If anything, that makes him probably deadlier. I guess he's probably pissed off, even though he never comes out. The thing is, he never raises his voice. He never yells. He never laughs manically. He's always studying you. He's always just watching you and absorbing every detail about you. Like he can talk passionately when he wants to, but he's incredibly articulate and smart. And that's why he's so different than, Palpatine, which I love Palpatine. I love Vader, right? But, Palpatine's, your cackling, mustache twirling bad guy. And Vader is your intimidating, physical, villain. No, he's a shit talker too. But Thrawn's just a different type. And I like what they're doing with him so far. And I'm excited for what they'll potentially do with him in the future. Do not waste him. Do not waste him, okay? You have a lot of opportunity to do some very great things with him, and I hope they do so. But overall, chat, I thought this was a very strong episode of the series. By far the best by a significant amount, by a mile. That's just what I think. I really like this episode. What about you guys? What did you think of Ahsoka, the series so far? What did you think of this latest episode? And what did you think of the return of Grand Admiral Thrawn and Ezra Bridger? Let me know.
5 minutes later.
They did him right, to Trailblazers, to the music, the vibe, and his inflections in his voice, even down the smirk. Yeah, he's got that smirk. He's got that little smirk, that little smile, that knowing smile. He does that. They did in animation, so I'm glad he copied that over. That was pretty cool to see. Yeah. And that's the thing about, what Grand Admiral Thrawn introduced to Star Wars? Like, he is an interesting, yes, he's a master strategist and everything. He's a great character, but he's also a politician. And he's the kind of politician you want in Star Wars because, he's very Game of Thrones. I mean, to make the comparison, I know it's an overused comparison, but he's a very Game of Thrones-esque character. He's kind of like Tywin Lannister-esque to a degree in how he, manipulates the situation, how he makes use of history and knowledge and implements that in his strategy and how he interacts with people. Like, he's doing a lot of fucking, like, as soon as he introduces new elements introduced to him, he's like, okay, how am I going to play this? Like, he's that kind of guy. He's a strategist when it comes to war, to battles, but also to conversations. And you see him in the way he interacts with certain people, like whether it be Elsbeth, whether it be his own troops, whether it be, the Dark Sisters of Dathomir, the Dark Mothers, or even like Balin Skull and Shin Hati. He's like, he's handling them in a really cool way. Also, I forgot to mention this, but again, we're introduced to Grand Admiral Thrawn's troops, and they have all this mismatched parts, and they look so cool. They look battle-worn. I love it. We were introduced to his second in command in this episode, Enoch. I think his name is Commander Enoch. And what he reminds me of those Roman legionaries. Like, there's a lot of Roman references in this episode. Just like the use of, there's a lot of red. The stormtroopers are wearing like a lot of red clothing, and they're using a lot of gold. And we see this one, I think his name is Commander Enoch, correct me if I'm wrong, but he has like this stormtrooper helmet, but the mask is like this gold mask. And it looks awesome. It looks so cool. He has this really intimidating voice. I feel like he's a bit of a replacement for Rook, who was in the Thrawn trilogy novels and was also introduced in Rebels. He won't be coming back because he died there. And like Rook played a really important part of the novels, and his species did as well, and how Thrawn and the Empire were using them was very interesting. But yeah, his whole command and guard is really cool looking. And there's just some other things, like Thrawn's not like he'll lie to you, but he's also honest to a degree. Like, there's this one scene that I thought was interesting where he's not like Vader, where it's like, send all my troops out there to die, or he'll start killing people. It's like, it's okay if you make a mistake. He's just like, if you learn from it, as long as you learn from the mistake, then that's fine. I won't kill you. That's what Thrawn is. And Thrawn doesn't like to waste resources. Like, there's one point Elba's like, why don't you just send out your whole army to do this thing? He's like, a lot of my people have died. Okay. And we don't have as much resources as I would like. And so, no, we have to do this. And it's like, he's practical. He's a very practical villain. And so I'm like that a lot. But no, his whole troops and Commander Enoch, such a great look. Let's see here. And he's not a Force user either, which is wonderful. I love the fact he's not a Force, because he's a different type of threat. That's why he was so refreshing in the 90s. It was like, who is this guy? In these books. He's not like Vader. He's not a Palpatine. But yeah, the smirk and everything at Balin, I love that. He's like, oh, look at you. Oh, who are you? And he knew exactly who he was, too. He's like, I've read about you. Oh, I love that. Thrawn and Tarkin in the books, yes. In the books, like in the new canon novels, yeah, they interact. And in Rebels, they knew each other. Like, Tarkin asked for Thrawn because he knew how competent he was. So, yeah, they knew each other. They had respect for each other as far as I know. Although I don't think Thrawn liked Tarkin's reliance on the Death Star. Actually, Thrawn hated the Death Star. He thought it was a stupid idea. He was right. He was right. Oh, man.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
If I had my way with Star Wars right now, I've talked about this before. I would like to explore just completely different eras and get as far away from the Skywalker stuff as possible, right? Like, let's go to the Old Republic. Let's go 4,000 years in the past and do like Knights of the Old Republic stuff. Like, let's go. Let's do Revan and all that, right? And I would also do something that's in the far future. In the far future, way after the events of the OG trilogy, like to the point where now the OG trilogy is like Legends, where it's like, yeah, there's the where Luke Skywalker is like a mythical figure, but he's like, it's an old story people have passed down, like shit like that, right? And let's go like thousands. I would do stuff thousands of years in the past, thousands in the future, but then I understand that you still gotta use. They're gonna play in that era no matter what, whether you want it to be or not. And I would have it where I would do the Thrawn trilogy. It's like the sequels happen, sure, whatever, but then I would greenlight a Thrawn trilogy where, and this is the controversial thing, I would recast like a lot of those. I mean, you could have done it had the new trilogy not been made. You could have still done it, except instead of having the Thrawn trilogy take place, like in the case of the books, 6 years after the events of Return of the Jedi, I would have it where now it takes place 30 years after Return of the Jedi, and he's been out there the entire time. Like that's what I would do. And I think that would be really cool. But now since you can't do that, you're like, okay, so I would have it where it is, this is the time frame. It's 10 years, 6 years, whatever it is after Return of the Jedi. But I would just recast. I would recast Luke Skywalker. I would recast Han Solo. I would recast Princess Leia and get younger actors to play them, and then do that story. And now because you they still can't do that, but they're not. What they're going to end up inevitably doing is I guess they're going to do a loose adaptation of Heir to the Empire, maybe those movies, but it's going to be in order to fix the plot holes that they created for the new sequel trilogy, which is like, fuck. And so that's the one thing that I'm concerned about. And I don't want them to misuse Thrawn to fix the mistakes of the past. Like, that's the thing I'd like to avoid. So I would do it. Let's just do the Thrawn trilogy. He tries to create his new empire, fights against the corrupt New Republic, do all that, bring in Luke, Leia, Han, all them. Just got to recast those actors and be like, fucking get what's his name? Get Sebastian Stan to be Luke. He looks just like a young Mark Hamill. There you go. People have like, it's kind of like, and don't do any of that. I'm like, I'm totally like the whole. Sometimes the de-aging works. Like in the case of like Michael Douglas and Ant-Man, I think that worked really well. But I don't need that for an entire movie. Like for a scene, that's fine. But for an entire movie, recast, get new actors to play these characters, and then do those. That's what I would fucking do. But they're not gonna do what I want to do, chat. And I'm not running $1 billion division of the Disney Corporation. So, but if I did, that's what I would do. But the other day, this is a good episode. Loved Admiral Thrawn. It was so cool to see his live action debut. They nailed it. In my opinion. So very happy about that. I hope everyone enjoyed the video, and I want to take the time to tell you about my Patreon, Class in the Glass, which offers hundreds of film commentaries and video reactions to numerous movies, TV shows, and cartoons. If you're a fan of shows like Batman the Animated Series and Avatar: The Last Airbender, or films like Aliens and Raiders of the Lost Ark, my Patreon is the platform for you. Currently, I'm doing a subathon to reach 75 subs on the platform. If we hit 75 subs, we'll be able to start voting on the next edited YouTube reaction, which will include actual clips and scenes from the movies and shows I comment over. Choose from such films as Fire and Ice, Masters of the Universe, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, or Spawn. Subscribing at any tier level is appreciated, and feel free to give feedback at any time. Thank you again for watching the video, and see you next time.